This week's parsha is Parsha Lech Lecha, and we'll be focusing in on the first Rashi of this week's parsha. Now, this Torah is based on a shir I heard from Rabbi Gershenfeld. We will also quote Rabbi Tatz and Rabbi Bernstein as we go along. But so the focus of Rashi is really on these words Lech Lecha. Now, just to quote the verse, so we get the context. It says, "Vayomer Hashem el Avram," right? The famous words Lech Lecha, me'artecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha la'aretz asher areka. Right? Hashem said to Avram, Lech Lecha, from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house, the land that I will show you. Now, what prompts Rashi's comment is this Lech Lecha. What do we mean? Again, Rashi only responds and only comments, not when he has some beautiful divrei Torah to share. He's commentating on a textual difficulty, right? There's something that seems off with the text. So that's what he's coming to clarify. Now, the issue is, Hashem is giving Avram this commandment to go. Now, in order to issue that commandment, he could have just said, Lech be'artzecha, u'miladetecha, u'mibeit avicha, etc. That's all that needed to be said. Why this extra lecha? Why Lech Lecha? So says Rashi, that's because lecha means it's for you. In what ways? Says Rashi, lehanatcha u'letovatcha, right? I'll make for you a great nation, and things will be good for you. But that's interesting because those are two words. Lahana'atcha, right, for your pleasure, u'letovatcha, for your good. Are those two things the same thing? Maybe they are, right? They could be synonyms. The answer is no. Lahanatcha means for your pleasure, and tovatcha means for your good. Pleasure and good are not necessarily the same thing. For example, many people do not like to eat vegetables, but vegetables are good for us, right? We get no pleasure from eating vegetables, but we should because it's good nutritionally, right? It helps us build our bodies in a healthy way. So too, sometimes we'll endure difficulties, and they are not pleasurable at all, but they're good for us. They humble us. They give us a lot more perspective. Often some people will say, in hindsight, I would, even though it was really difficult to go through this experience, this loss, business loss, personal loss, whatever it is, it really helped build who I am today, and I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't endured that. So again, it wasn't pleasurable at the time, but it's good for us. I actually saw this as a side point. It was an article by Aish. It was on Rosh Hashanah, and I saw this article. It was placed on my seat conveniently. It wasn't just me. It was on many people's seats. And it said, it's interesting to note the difference between, say, the secular New Year and the Jewish New Year. In the secular New Year, we say, Happy New Year. In the Jewish New Year, we say, Shana Tova. Those two things are not the same. Have a happy New Year. Pursue happiness. Whatever makes you happy, go for it. In the Jewish New Year, we say, have a good New Year. Because a good New Year could potentially be a hard year. It could also be a great year and an easy year and a very wonderful year. But the idea is, what are we focused on? What's the meaning of our years? What's the meaning of our lives? Is it to have a good life or a happy life? Now, often when you have a good life, when you're focused on living a good, wholesome life, that will make you happy. Because happiness is not meant to be the goal. It's just a byproduct of living a good life. As opposed to, say, a different mentality, which is, Happy New Year, pursue happiness. That may not be the best life, and you may not even become happy as we go along. So that's the idea in Rashi. But truth is, we want to have a good life and a pleasurable life. So how do we do that? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Avram, you'll have both. Don't worry about it. Now why? How do you have both? Because you have both bodies and souls. Now our body wants to have pleasure. Our soul wants us to be good people. That's how our soul feels fulfilled. And so God is telling Avram, go, and don't worry about it. You'll have pleasure, right? I'll make you into a great nation. You'll have many children, and it'll also be good for you. It'll make you into a better person. So we see that is contained within it. Now, how do we get there? And speaking of Avram, this is Avram's introduction almost. Go, the God's calling, Lech Lecha. Rabbi Tatz has a fascinating observation about what the innovation of Avram was. Because if we were to ask, okay, so this begins Avram's journey, right? The whole journey of the Jewish people. What was Avram's innovation, right? What was Judaism's great idea that it spread throughout the world? Now, most people believe that it's monotheism. And actually, says Rabbi Tatz, that is incorrect. It was not monotheism. And there's a simple proof for this. That is to say, the Jewish ancestor, far before Avram, was one of the sons of Noah, Shem, right? People, the famous word, we're not trying to talk about this too much, but the idea of anti-Semitism, where does that word come from? Why does that connote Jews? Because Sem comes from Shem, right? Like anti-Shemiyut. This Shem is because that's where Avram descended from. He descended from the children of Noach, and that was Shem. So both Shem and Aver was Shem's great-grandson, they established the yeshiva, and they're teaching Torah, true values. And in fact, first, this is clearly within our Masorah, that's one. But second, we actually even have Rashi's to it. If we look at Parshat Vayetze, right, that's chapter 28, verse 11, and we look at, this is talking about Yaakov and how he ran away from Esav, and it says, Vayashkev b'makom ahu. Right, so it's a lashon mute, and it says Rashi, be'oto makom shachav, aval yudaled shanim sheshamash bebeit ever lo shachav alayla, she'osak b'Torah. Yaakov was learning Torah in the Beis Midrash of Aver. He was learning Aver's Torah. Now, clearly we're saying, Yaakov would not learn Torah if it was not legitimate stuff. And so we see that actually the idea of Torah, of monotheism, actually pre-existed Avram. That was not Avram's innovation. It was Shem's and Aver's. They were teaching it for years, for hundreds of years before Avram entered the scene. So if that's true, what was Avram's innovation? What made his ideas so radical and revolutionary? Says Rabbi Tatz, it wasn't the Torah of Torah, it was the idea of a mitzvah, the idea of mitzvahs. What is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is taking a physical action and turning it into a spiritual concept. For example, when a person gives tzedakah, right? He helps a poor person. That's a very nice thing to do. But not only is it a nice thing to do, you're actually connecting to God through performing this mitzvah. Now, why is this so revolutionary? And by the way, there are 613 mitzvahs. There are very few that are thought-based. Very few. Maybe the idea of belief in God, right? But otherwise, if we're to run through the whole gamut of mitzvahs, all of them require some kind of physical action. All of them. Except for, again, maybe like a handful. I think Ramban counts 12 out of 613. That's not bad. That means over 600 of them are action-based. Now, why is this so revolutionary? Because when we see, and we see this even today, even Shem and Aver, what were Shem and Aver doing? They were teaching Torah where? Up on the mountaintops. They were hermits. Even now, when people think of spiritual individuals, they go deep into a forest, they isolate themselves in caves, on the mountains, they separate themselves from physicality, right? Because they say, and this isn't irrational, that if we engage in the physical world, if we get married, right, if we relate to intimacy, if we eat pleasurable foods, if we engage in that, then it could bring the soul down. And that's true. Often that is exactly what happens. When we engage in physicality without perspective, then at the end of the day, we're not engaging in a soul-benefiting spiritual activity. We're engaging in a chomriyut, right? We're engaging our physical selves, and that's it. But that was what made Avram so revolutionary. And that's why, by the way, people rebelled against him so hard. Nimrod, right, who rebelled against Avram and threw him into the Kivshan Esh, right, threw him into a furnace. Why did he do that? Why did Nimrod pursue Shem and Aver? Because Nimrod didn't care about Shem and Aver. He's like, look, you can teach your Torah true values, that's fine. Just stay on the mountaintops, don't bother us. And Shem and Aver weren't bothering them, so Nimrod had no problem. But Avram came into the scene and he's like, no, this is obligatory for everybody to engage in spiritual living, to engage in ethical behavior in our everyday actions. That was the revolution of Avram. And by the way, there's actually a textual, this I've seen from Rav Bernstein. I heard this from Rav Bernstein. I was stunned when I saw this. So, in this week's parsha, right, we have Avram. There are many things that are going on, but Lot, Avram's nephew, gets captured in the war of the four kings against the 5 kings. The 4 kings win, which means if they defeated 5 kings, that they must have been extremely powerful, and they capture Lot. When Avram finds out about this, for whatever reason, but at the very least because this is because Lot is his nephew, it's family, Avram goes to war. And then what do we see? So Avram wins. And then we are in chapter 14. Okay, so he wins. And then what happens? Verse 18. Umalki tzedek, melech shalem, hoti lechem v'yayin, v'hu choin elyon. Right? But Malki tzedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God, the Most High. So says Rashi, this is critical. Umalki tzedek, midrash agata, hu Shem v'Noach. That's Shem, our ancestor, the person who's teaching Torah true values. Who is he? He's a choin elyon. He's a God of the Most High. Okay, let's look at the next pasuk. Ve'varcheu ve'yomar Baruch Avram leil elyon konei shamayim va'aretz. He blessed him, saying, as in Melchizedek blessed Avram, blessed is Avram of God, the Most High, maker of heaven and earth. Now, what's the contrast? Melchizedek, Shem, was the king of God, most high. He's the most high. He has nothing to do with us little people on earth, right? He's the God most high, and that's why I've isolated myself. What's Avram doing? Avram, Baruch Avram Le'el Elyon, my God, who's Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. He's the maker of heaven and earth. Avram has introduced the concept of earth. And now, why did Melchizedek bless Avram? Because Melchizedek was blown away by Avram. Why? Because Melchizedek had always said we have to remove ourselves from the world. But Melchizedek now sees Avram, a holy guy who's teaching Torah, who's learning Torah, but also who went to war to save his nephew. He engaged in physicality. Now Melchizedek sees this and he's like, hang on a second. First, Avram did something crazy. He went to war with maximum of 318 people against 4 armies, right? And he won. Melchizedek is seeing this, and he knows that Avram is in line with God, and he can't help but think, wow, what Avram must be doing must be legitimate. He just defeated 4 armies, and he's getting involved in the world. And once Melchizedek sees this, what's his reaction? Let's go back to verse 18. U'Melchizedek melech Shalom hotzi lechem vayayin. He brought out bread and wine. He's now serving guests. Why? Because we see this idea of mitzvah. We have not only the concept of Melech El Elyon, right, of God on Most High, who's removed from the world, but no, who's involved in the day-to-day. And that's why Melchizedek now comes out and serves food. He serves his guests. He does have Achnasat Orchim. That's amazing. That is the contrast between Avram and everyone else. That's what made Avram unique. He introduced the idea of not only Torah, but the idea of mitzvah, of connecting the physical world to the spiritual, and not saying, now let's refrain from the physical so that we could keep the spiritual, elevated. But he says, no, let's take the physical, let's go down into the world, and let's elevate it to the God Most High. We'll end it there. Shabbat Shalom.